The first night in my dream beach house, I slept with the windows open. Not wide, just enough to let the ocean breathe into the room. Salt air, soft wind, the distant rhythm of waves. It was the kind of sound that makes your nervous system unclench without asking permission. The kind of sound people pay for in meditation apps because they can't get it in real life. But I had it in real life now. I lay in bed listening and thinking, finally, this is it. Peace. No upstairs neighbors. No slamming doors in hallways. No sirens every other night. No memories in the walls. Just sun-bleached wood, pale linen curtains, and a porch that faced the water like it was a promise. I'd worked for it, saved for it, bled for it. And if anyone had asked why a woman in her early 30s would buy a beach house alone and move 3 hours away from the city, I could have given a dozen respectable answers. Remote work, fresh start, mental health, nature. But the real answer was simpler. I needed somewhere my past couldn't follow. I wasn't running from a person exactly. I was running from a feeling. The feeling of being watched. The feeling that every choice I made got filtered through someone else's opinion. Someone else's need. My ex, Mark, had never hit me. That's the thing people always expect when you say ex and peace in the same sentence. But he'd controlled the air in every room we were in. Controlled with questions that weren't questions. With jokes that landed like warnings. With the slow erosion of privacy. Checking my phone as a joke. Asking who I was texting. Showing up places coincidentally. By the time I left, I'd stopped posting photos online. Stopped sharing my location. Stopped saying what I wanted out loud because wanting something felt like giving someone a target. So when I signed the closing papers for the beach house, I didn't tell anyone. Not even my closest friends. Not until the keys were in my palm. And even then, I waited. I drove down the coast on a Thursday morning with my car packed, like I was fleeing a life. Boxes, a plant, a folded quilt my mother made, my laptop, my dog, Nori, curled on the passenger seat, eyes half closed like she believed in the new chapter before I did. The house looked even better in person than in the listing. A little weathered in that charming way, white shingles, seagrass in the yard, a wraparound porch with a swing. Not huge, but perfect. The kind of place where you imagine reading with bare feet and never checking your phone. The previous owner had been an older man named Peter Lawson. The realtor said he'd moved inland to be closer to family. The sale had been smooth. No drama. At closing, Peter had smiled politely and said, "Take care of her. She's a good house." Like the house was a living thing. I'd smiled back and said, "I will." And I meant it. The first day was a blur of small happiness. Unpacking dishes, hanging a shower curtain, watching Nori run in the sand like she'd been waiting her whole life to do it. That evening, I sat on the porch swing with a mug of tea and listened to the ocean until the sky turned lavender and the porch light flickered on automatically. I didn't feel lonely. I felt empty in the best way. Like the noise in my head had finally quieted enough that I could hear myself again. Then my phone buzzed. A notification. Unknown login attempt. My email. I stared at it, pulse spiking. I changed the password immediately. Turned on extra security. Told myself it was just a random bot, a coincidence. Still, a thin thread of unease tugged at the moment. I ignored it. That was mistake number 1. Assuming peace is something you can buy and then stop guarding. The second night, Nori started barking at the wall. It was almost midnight. I'd fallen asleep to the sound of waves again, the way people do when they finally feel safe enough to let their body drop. Then, woof, 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 sharp, angry, focused. I jolted up, heart racing, and saw Nori standing at the edge of the bedroom, facing the far wall near the closet. hair raised along her spine. "What is it?" I whispered. She barked again, then pressed her nose to the baseboard like she was trying to smell through the drywall. I got up slowly, barefoot, and walked to the wall. Nothing. No window, no door, just wall. I turned on the lamp, scanned the room. Nori kept barking, then whined, pacing in a small circle like she couldn't decide whether to attack or run. I pressed my palm flat against the drywall. It felt normal, cool, solid, but my skin prickled. I told myself it was a lizard in the crawl space, a mouse, a weird new house sound. Beach houses creak, they shift, they breathe. I calmed Nori, took her outside, checked the yard with a flashlight. Nothing. When I came back in, the barking stopped. But I didn't fall asleep as easily, because the old feeling, being watched, had brushed my spine like a cold finger. The next morning, I mentioned it casually to my friend Lila on a call. "Nori barked at a wall all night," I said, laughing like it was nothing. Lila snorted. "Girl, she's telling you the house is haunted." "It's not haunted," I said. "It's just old." "Old houses are creepy," she said. "Check for rats." "Thanks," I deadpanned. We laughed, and for a moment I felt stupid for being tense. Then, that afternoon, I found the first thing that proved I wasn't imagining it. I was in the living room, unpacking books, when my finger brushed the underside of the mantel. Something gritty. I looked closer. A tiny smear of black residue, like dust mixed with adhesive. I frowned, grabbed a damp cloth, wiped it. More residue came off than expected. Underneath, there was a faint outline, almost like something small had been mounted there and removed. A tiny rectangle. My stomach tightened. People mount things on mantels all the time. Sensors, decor, small lights. Still, I hadn't mounted anything. The previous owner hadn't mentioned anything. I took a photo with my phone. Then I noticed something else. On the opposite wall, near the bookshelf, there was another faint outline. Higher up, near eye level if you were sitting on the couch. I stared at it. 2 marks in the same room. And suddenly, my rats in the wall theory felt thin. That night, I invited someone over. Not a party, not friends, just one person I trusted. My cousin Ben. Ben is the kind of man who owns a toolbox the size of a small coffin and actually knows what half the tools do. He's an electrician by trade, calm and methodical, the kind of person who doesn't get dramatic without evidence. He drove down after work, took one look at my face and said, "Okay, show me." I led him inside, pointed out the marks. Ben crouched by the mantel, ran his fingers along the edge, sniffed the residue like a bloodhound. "Sticky," he murmured. "What does that mean?" I asked. Ben stood, scanned the room slowly. "Could have been a small camera mount," he said casually. My stomach dropped. "A camera?" I repeated. Ben held up a hand. Could have also been a baby monitor, a motion sensor, a smart home hub. Let's not jump." But his eyes had sharpened. He walked to the wall Nori had barked at. He tapped it lightly with his knuckles. Then he frowned. "This sounds hollow," he said. "It's a wall," I said, trying to laugh. "No," Ben said, tapping again, moving his hand along. "This section sounds different." He took out a small stud finder, ran it along the drywall. Then he paused. "What?" I asked, voice tight. Ben looked at me. "There's an opening here," he said quietly. My skin went cold. Ben set his tool bag down and said, "Do you have the home inspection report?" I ran to my desk, pulled up the email, showed him the PDF. Ben skimmed. "Nothing about an access panel," he muttered. Then he looked back at the wall. "Where does this wall back up to?" he asked. "Closet," I said. "Bedroom closet." Ben nodded slowly. "Okay." We checked the closet. We went into the bedroom. Ben opened the closet, pushed aside my hanging clothes, and ran his hands along the back wall. He found it in under 30 seconds. A tiny seam. A section of baseboard that didn't sit perfectly flush. Ben crouched, pressed on the edge. It shifted. Just slightly. My breath stopped. Ben looked up at me. "Get your phone ready," he said. I swallowed hard and turned on my camera. Ben slid a thin, flathead screwdriver under the seam and gently pried. The panel popped loose with a soft crack. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a hardcover book, but behind it was darkness. Ben angled his phone flashlight inside, and the beam landed on something that made my legs go weak. A small black device mounted on a bracket, a lens, pointed directly through a tiny drilled hole into my bedroom. I didn't breathe. My mind refused to label it for half a second, like naming it would make it real. Ben's voice was flat. "That's a camera." My stomach heaved. I covered my mouth with my hand so I wouldn't make a sound that would scare Nori, or me. Ben leaned closer, careful not to touch it with bare fingers. He pointed. "There's wiring," he said. "This isn't some cheap wireless nanny cam someone forgot. This is installed." I stared at the lens, at the hole, at the fact that I'd slept here, changed clothes here, cried quietly into my pillow the first night, because grief doesn't stop just because you moved. My hands started shaking so hard my phone video wobbled. Ben stepped back and said, "Okay, we don't touch it. We call the police." My voice came out as a whisper. "What if it's still recording?" Ben's jaw tightened. "It probably is." My skin went colder. Ben pulled the closet door mostly closed, like hiding it would help. Then he guided me to the kitchen table and sat me down like my body was a fragile object. "Listen to me," he said calmly. "You don't panic. You don't call a neighbor. You don't post anything. We call police. We document. That's it." I nodded, numb. He called. While we waited, Ben did one more thing. He walked the house, scanning for more seams, more hollow sounds, more tiny holes that didn't belong. He found another one. In the living room. Behind the bookshelf. A second access panel. My mouth went dry. 2 cameras, 2 rooms. One pointed at my couch. One pointed at my bed. The police arrived 20 minutes later. 2 officers, then a third, with a detective's badge clipped to his belt. Detective Harlow. They took one look at Ben's video, and Harlow's expression changed from routine to alert. "Okay," he said quietly. "This is serious." They photographed the panels. Dusting powder came out. Evidence bags. They asked me questions that made my throat hurt. "Who lived here before you? Do you know him personally? Anyone have access during the sale? Do you have an ex? Anyone who might target you?" I hesitated because saying my ex out loud felt like opening a door I'd tried to close. But Harlow's eyes were steady and non-judgmental. So I said it. "Yes," I whispered. "My ex." "What's his name?" Harlow asked. "Mark," I said. "Mark Halden." Harlow wrote it down. Then he asked, "Did he know you bought this house?" I swallowed. "No." Harlow's pen paused. "Then how did he find you?" My heart hammered. "I don't know," I said, and my voice cracked. "I didn't tell anyone." Ben's voice cut in, calm. "Could be from public records," he said. "Property deeds are searchable." Harlow nodded. "Yes, but installing cameras requires access." The officers removed the devices carefully, preserving them. Harlow said they'd send them to a forensic unit to see if they were actively transmitting and where. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "I want you to stay somewhere else tonight." My stomach tightened. "I don't want to leave." Harlow's tone stayed firm but kind. "I understand, but whoever installed these had access to your home. They may still—" Ben squeezed my shoulder. I wanted to argue. I wanted to plant my feet and refuse to be chased out of my own peace. But then I pictured that lens, silently watching, and the anger collapsed into something smaller. Fear. I packed an overnight bag with trembling hands and went to a small motel inland with Ben and Nori. I didn't sleep. At 2:11 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. One message. Nice place. Looks better on you. My blood turned to ice. Ben saw my face. What? He asked. I showed him the screen. His expression hardened instantly. Forward that to the detective, he said. I did. 2 hours later, another message came. You wanted peace. You should have stayed quiet. My hands shook so badly, I almost dropped the phone. In the morning, Detective Harlow called. His voice was different now, sharper, urgent. Ms. Carter, he said, we pulled data from one of the devices. I sat up, heart pounding. What data? He paused, then said, it was transmitting to a local receiver. Not the internet. Someone nearby was collecting footage. Nearby. My stomach dropped. Like, a neighbor? I whispered. Harlow didn't confirm yet. We're investigating. But we also ran the serial numbers and purchase history. My breath caught. The devices were purchased with a card, he said. A card tied to a name. I gripped the motel blanket. What name? I asked. Harlow's voice went flat. Peter Lawson. The previous owner. My stomach turned. But he moved, I whispered. He said. Harlow cut in gently. People say a lot of things. I stared at the wall, nausea rolling through me. The man who called it a good house. The man who smiled politely at closing. He hadn't been selling a house. He'd been handing off a surveillance setup. Harlow continued, we're obtaining a warrant for the property and surrounding area. We also want you to think, did anything feel odd during the sale? Any rushed paperwork? Any strange requests? I swallowed hard. The only thing that came to mind was small and stupid. At closing, Peter had asked, casually, if I planned to work from home a lot. I'd laughed and said yes. He'd nodded like he'd confirmed something. I hadn't thought about it until now. Harlow exhaled. We'll follow up. For now, do not return to the house alone. By noon, I was back, this time with police. They canvassed the neighborhood quietly. Harlow and another detective knocked on doors, asked questions, looked at utility boxes, examined fence lines, and then, at 3:36 p.m., they found it. Not in my house, in the house next door. A small receiving unit in a garage, hidden behind a stack of storage bins, connected to a laptop. The neighbor, a man in his 40s named Glenn, claimed he didn't know what it was. But the laptop told a different story. Folders, dates, room labels, bedroom, living room. My throat closed. Harlow's face was stone when he came to tell me. Ms. Carter, he said quietly, someone has been watching from next door. I felt my knees weaken. Ben caught my elbow before I could fall. I whispered, how long? Harlow looked down at his notes. Based on the file dates, at least a year, he said. A year. Before I even bought the house. He'd been filming the previous occupants, too. And Peter Lawson, my seller, had either participated or profited. Harlow's voice stayed steady. We're making arrests. Glenn was handcuffed in his driveway while neighbors peeked through curtains. His face was blank, like he still believed he could talk his way out. Peter Lawson was located that evening in the inland town he claimed he'd moved to. And when police searched his belongings, they found something that made my skin crawl even more than the cameras. A notebook, pages of addresses, names, notes like, single woman, lives alone, works from home, no dog, night routine. My name was on the last page, my house listed under it like a prize. That night, Detective Harlow called again. We have another update, he said. My stomach tightened. What? He paused, then said, your ex, Mark Halden, he's been in contact with Peter Lawson. My blood went cold. How? I whispered. Phone records, Harlow said. Multiple calls, around the time you closed. I stared at the motel ceiling. I hadn't told Mark where I was, but he didn't need me to tell him. He just needed a man like Peter, someone already skilled at watching, someone willing to sell privacy the way other people sell furniture. Harlow's voice softened slightly. We're pursuing that angle. We also recommend you obtain an emergency protective order. I swallowed. I thought I was safe. Harlow didn't lie to me. You're safer now than you were yesterday, he said, but we're not done. When I finally returned to the house, it didn't feel like a dream anymore. It felt violated. The ocean was still there. The porch swing still creaked. The walls still looked like walls, but I couldn't unknow what I knew, that someone had drilled tiny holes into my life. That piece had been staged like a set. Ben helped me patch the openings temporarily. The police installed extra patrol checks. I changed every lock and added cameras. My cameras, pointed outward, not inward. I replaced the closet panel entirely. And then I stood in my bedroom, staring at the spot where the lens had been. Nori sat beside me, leaning into my leg. I pressed my hand flat to the new drywall and let myself breathe. Because here's the truth, no one tells you. You don't move on from being watched by pretending it never happened. You move on by taking your space back inch by inch. And I did. I went to court. I filed the restraining order against Mark. I gave the detective every message, every screenshot, every detail. I stopped being private in the way predators prefer and started being private in the way survivors need. Documented, protected, strategic. A month later, Harlow called with the final detail that made me sit down hard. They found footage, he said. My throat tightened. Of me? Yes, he said carefully, but also of a previous woman. My blood went cold. Previous woman? I whispered. Harlow paused. There's an ongoing missing person case, and the footage suggests surveillance may have been used to facilitate stalking. My stomach turned. This had never been about me alone. I was just the newest target. And in that moment, my dream beach house stopped being a symbol of escape and became something else. A place where the truth surfaced. A place that exposed a network of quiet predators who believed privacy was something they could steal and resell. I looked out at the ocean that evening. It was still beautiful, still endless, still indifferent. But for the first time since buying the house, I didn't sit on the porch swing, searching for peace like it was something fragile. I sat there with my shoulders squared and my phone in my pocket, recording the air if it needed to. Because peace isn't a location. It's a condition you defend. And the day we found the hidden camera in the wall was the day I stopped running from being watched and started making sure the people who watched got seen.